The air inside the Chicago coffee shop was thick with the scent of roasted beans and the faint hum of conversation, a chaotic symphony of clinking cups and muffled laughter. I stood behind the counter, my tie loosened just enough to breathe, watching the line stretch toward the door. It was one of those late autumn afternoons where the wind rattled the windows, and the gray sky pressed down on the city like a judge's gavel. I'd been managing this place for 3 years, a small kingdom of caffeine and chaos. But it wasn't the espresso shots or the bottom line that kept me here. It was her. Emily moved through the crowd like she owned the room, balancing a tray of steaming mugs with a grace I couldn't fathom. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, a few strands slipping free to frame her face, and her eyes, sharp green alive, caught mine for half a second before she turned to a customer. She was new, barely a month into the job, but she worked the counter like she'd been born to it. Competence radiated off her, the kind that made you stop and stare, the kind that made me wonder how someone like her ended up pouring coffee in a place like this. Double shot, no foam, she called out, sliding a cup across the counter to a guy in a cheap suit who barely looked up from his phone. Her voice cut through the noise, firm but warm, and I caught myself smiling. I admired her, not just the way she handled the rush, but the way she seemed to see through the bullshit. The customers who barked orders, the ones who left no tip, the ones who thought they were better than her. She met them all with that same steady gaze, like she was sizing them up for something bigger. I leaned against a register, pretending to check receipts, but really I was watching her. The shop wasn't much, a narrow space with chipped wooden tables and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed since I took over, but it felt alive with her in it. The walls were plastered with faded posters of jazz musicians. The floor scuffed from 1,000 hurried steps, and the heat from the espresso machine made the air heavy. Outside, the looped skyscrapers loomed, their steel and glass a stark contrast to this little hole we'd carved out. I liked the tension of it, the way the city's power pulsed just beyond the door while we held court over lattes and scones. "Hey, James," she said suddenly, snapping me out of my haze. She was closer now, wiping her hands on a towel, her apron streaked with coffee grounds. "You gonna stand there all day, or you gonna help me with this line?" I grinned, thought I'd let you shine a little longer. She rolled her eyes, but there was a spark in it, a flicker of something that hit me square in the chest. "Shine's overrated. I'd settle for a break." "Fair enough." I stepped up beside her, brushing her shoulder accidentally, or maybe not, and took an order from a woman in a fur coat who smelled like money and impatience. Emily didn't miss a beat, firing up a grinder, and for a while we worked in sync, the rhythm of it almost hypnotic. I stole glances at her when I could, noting the way her jaw tightened when a customer snapped, the way she exhaled slow and deliberate, like she was holding something back. By the time the rush died down, the sky outside had darkened, streetlights flickering on like hesitant stars. We were alone behind the counter, the last stragglers nursing their drinks in the corner. I poured us both a coffee, black, no nonsense, and slid hers across the wood. "You're good at this," I said, leaning back against the sink. "Too good, maybe." She raised an eyebrow, cradling the mug. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means you don't belong here. Not long term, anyway." I took a sip, the heat biting my tongue. "You've got something else in you. I can tell." She laughed, short and sharp, but her eyes didn't match it. "You sound like my dad." "Emily, you're wasting your potential. Maybe I like it here. Ever think of that?" "Do you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window, her reflection caught in the glass, and I saw a flicker of unease cross her face. "It's a job," she said finally. "Pays the rent. Keeps me sane." I nodded, letting it drop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying. To me, to herself, maybe both. There was a restlessness in her, a hunger I recognized because I felt it too. I clawed my way into managing this place, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more power, influence, a seat at a table that mattered. And looking at her, I wondered if she wanted the same. That night, after we locked up, I walked her to the L station. The wind howled through the streets, tugging at her coat, and we didn't say much. But when she turned to go, she paused, looking back at me with those eyes that saw too much. "See you tomorrow, James," she said, and it sounded like a promise. Months later, we were married. It happened fast, too fast, some said, but it felt right. The coffee shop became our origin story, a gritty little footnote in something bigger. Emily quit not long after, trading the apron for a desk job at Horizon Manufacturing in Detroit. I stayed behind, running the shop, but my mind was already spinning, plotting, dreaming of a life where we wouldn't just serve the powerful, we'd become them. And then there was Nathan. Even back then, before he became the thorn in our side, I'd heard his name whispered among the suits who came in for their morning fix. A rising star at Horizon, they said, ruthless, connected, the kind of guy who'd smile while he stabbed you in the back. I didn't know it yet, but he'd be the one to test us, to push Emily to her breaking point. And me to mine. The Detroit skyline stabbed the horizon beyond the tinted windows of Horizon Manufacturing 7th-floor office, all jagged steel and cold glass, reflecting a city that never seemed to sleep. I stood by the coffee machine. Ironic, maybe, given where Emily and I started, watching her from across the room. She sat at her new desk, buried in a stack of files, her shoulders squared against the weight of it all. It was her first week here, a junior coordinator gig she'd fought tooth and nail to land after quitting the coffee shop. I'd driven up from Chicago to see her settle in, proud as hell, but something felt off the second I stepped into this place. The air was too still, too heavy, like the calm before a gavel drops. The office buzzed with a low hum, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the occasional call from a cubicle. It wasn't the chaos of our old shop. This was controlled, corporate, a machine grinding away at something I couldn't quite name. The walls were beige, sterile, lined with framed mission statements and photos of smiling executives shaking hands. A glass-walled conference room loomed at the far end, its blinds half open, revealing suits hunched over laptops. Power pulsed through this place, but it wasn't the kind I'd imagined for us. It felt borrowed, temporary, like we were trespassers in someone else's kingdom. Emily glanced up, caught my eye, and gave me a tight smile, half exhausted, half determined. She'd traded her apron for a blazer, her hair pulled back sharper than ever. But I could see the strain in her jaw, the way her fingers gripped the pen a little too hard. I admired her for it, the way she leapt at this chance, clawed her way out of pouring lattes into something bigger. Back in Chicago, I'd watched her shine, but here she was forging something new, and I wanted to believe it was a star of everything we'd dreamed. Then I heard him before I saw him. A voice cut through the drone of the office, sharp and lazy at the same time, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Well, look at this. Coffee Girl's got a desk now. I turned. Nathan stood by the printer, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips. He was taller than I'd pictured, lean and polished in a tailored suit that screamed money. His hair was slicked back, his eyes narrow and glinting with something predatory. I'd heard about him from Emily, her new supervisor, a guy who climbed Horizon's ladder fast and didn't care who he stepped on. She'd mentioned his jabs before, little digs about her lack of degree, but I hadn't realized how much they'd already worn her down. Emily didn't look up right away. Her pen froze mid-signature, and I saw her shoulders tense, a ripple of frustration she couldn't hide. "It's Emily," she said, her voice low, steady, but I caught the edge in it. "And I've been here 5 days." Nathan chuckled, a sound that grated against the hum of the room. 5 days, huh? Impressive. Guess they're handing out desks to anyone who can spell manufacturing now. He sauntered closer, picking up a stapler from her desk and turning it over in his hands like he owned it. No college, no connections. Must have been one hell of a sob story to get you in here. I felt my fists clench at my sides, heat creeping up my neck. I wanted to cross the room, knock that smug look off his face, but this wasn't my fight. Not yet. Emily's eyes flicked to me, a warning in them, and I stayed put, rooted by the coffee machine, the bitter scent of burnt grounds mixing with my rising anger. She set her pen down, deliberate, and leaned back in her chair, meeting his gaze. "I got here because I'm good at what I do. You'd know that if you bother to read my work instead of running your mouth." The office went quieter, heads turning subtly, a few glances darting between them. Nathan raised an eyebrow, unfazed, and dropped the stapler back on her desk with a clatter. "Cute. Real cute. But let's not kid ourselves, sweetheart. You're a charity case in a borrowed blazer. Enjoy it while it lasts. He walked off, leaving a trail of silence in his wake, and I saw Emily's mask slip just for a second. Her hand shook as she picked up her pen again, and when she exhaled, it was ragged, like she'd been holding her breath too long. I crossed the room, ignoring the stares, and crouched beside her chair. You okay? I asked, keeping my voice low. She nodded, but it was mechanical, her eyes fixed on the paper in front of her. He's an asshole. That's all. I can handle it. You shouldn't have to. I glanced toward Nathan's retreating back, his laughter echoing from the break room. He's got no right. James. Her tone sharpened. Cutting me off. I said I can handle it. This is my shot. I'm not screwing it up because of some prick in a suit. I swallowed hard, nodding, but the admiration I felt earlier was twisting into something darker. Rage, maybe, or helplessness. I'd seen her take on rude customers, late shipments, broken machines, but this was different. Nathan wasn't just a hurdle. He was a wall, and I could already see the cracks he was carving into her. That night, we sat in her tiny Detroit apartment, a fourth-floor walk-up with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. The furniture was secondhand, the air thick with the smell of takeout we hadn't touched. She stared at the TV, some legal drama flickering across the screen, but I knew she wasn't watching. He's not going to stop, she said suddenly, her voice flat. He's got it out for me. I don't even know why. I set my beard down, leaning forward. Because you threaten him. You're better than he expects, and he can't stand it. She laughed, bitter and hollow. Better? I'm barely keeping up. No degree, no fancy family. He's right about that part. I'm out of my depth, James. You're not. I grabbed her hand, forcing her to look at me. You're tougher than he'll ever be. You've got something he doesn't. Guts. He's just loud. She pulled her hand back, rubbing her temples. Maybe, but I'm tired already. 5 days, and I'm exhausted. What's it going to be like in 5 months? I didn't have an answer, and that scared me more than Nathan's taunts. I'd pushed her to take this job, told her she was meant for more, but now I wondered if I'd set her up to drown. The ambition I'd always carried, the hunger for power, for a life bigger than a coffee shop. Felt selfish now, like I'd drag her into my dream without asking if it was hers too. The next day, I drove back to Chicago, the hum of the highway drowning out my thoughts. Emily stayed behind, facing Nathan, facing Horizon, facing a fight I couldn't join. But as the miles stretched out, a seed took root in my mind, sharp, jagged, undeniable. Nathan wasn't just a problem for her. He was a challenge for us. And I'd be damned if I let him win. The highway faded into a gray blur as I gripped the steering wheel, the hum of the engine a dull roar beneath my thoughts. Detroit shrank in the rearview mirror, its smokestacks and spires swallowed by distance. But Emily stayed sharp in my mind, her slumped shoulders, her voice cracking under Nathan's shadow. I'd left her there, alone in that fourth-floor walk-up, staring at a TV she wasn't watching, and it gnawed at me. The radio crackled with static, some talk show host droning about corporate mergers, but I couldn't focus. All I could see was her desk at Horizon Manufacturing, that sterile beige cage where Nathan prowled like a vulture circling a kill. Back in Chicago, the coffee shop felt emptier without her. The air still carried the burnt tang of espresso. The walls still sagged under those faded jazz posters, but the rhythm was off. I moved through the motions, wiping counters, barking orders at the new kid who couldn't steam milk right, yet my head was 200 miles north. Emily had called that morning, her voice thin over the line, saying she'd survived another day. Survived. Not thrived, not conquered, just made it through. Nathan had cornered her again, this time in the break room, tossing barbs about her coffee shop resume, while the other suits snickered into their stale donuts. She'd laughed it off, she said, but I heard the exhaustion, the fraying edge of her resolve. I slammed a tray of mugs onto the counter, harder than I meant to, and the crash jolted the kid Tim or Tom, I didn't care, into dropping a pitcher of cream. It splattered across the floor, a white puddle spreading like the mess I felt brewing inside me. Clean it up, I snapped, turning away before he could mumble an apology. The shop's front window framed the loop's towers, their glass gleaming cold and indifferent, and I wonder how long it'd be before Horizon's machine chewed Emily up and spit her out. My hands itched for something to do, something to fix this. But I was stuck here, pouring shots for suits who'd never know her name. That night, I sat in my apartment, a cramped one-bedroom above a deli, the air thick with the smell of pastrami and regret, staring at the phone. It rang just past 9, Emily's name lighting up the screen. I snatched it up, heart thudding. "Hey," she said, and I could picture her curled on that sagging couch, the Detroit skyline a faint glow beyond her window. "You still mad?" "I'm not mad at you." I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. "I'm mad at that bastard. Nathan, he's got no business talking to you like that." She sighed, a sound that carried miles of weight. "He's my boss, James." "Sort of. I can't just punch him in the face." "Maybe I can." It slipped out, half a joke, half a promise, and she laughed. A real one this time, short but bright. "Don't tempt me," she said. "But seriously, I've got to figure this out." Today, he accidentally dumped my report in the shredder. Said it was a mix-up, but I saw him smirk. I had to redo it from scratch. 3 hours gone. I gripped the phone tighter, imagining Nathan's slick hair and sharper teeth. "He's testing you, seeing how much you'll take." "I know." Her voice dipped softer now, and I hate that it's working. I keep thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe I don't belong here. No degree, no fancy pedigree. I'm faking it, and he sees through me. Bullshit. I sat up, the springs creaking under me. "You're not faking anything. You're smarter than half those clowns, and you work harder than all of them. Nathan's just loud because he's scared of you." "Scared?" She snorted. "He's not scared. He's annoyed. Like I'm a bug he can't swat." "Then prove him wrong." My words came fast, fueled by the frustration I'd carried all day. "Outlast him. Outwork him. He wants you to quit. Don't give him the satisfaction." There was a pause, long enough that I thought the line had dropped. Then she said, "You make it sound easy. It's not, but you're not alone in this. I'm here, Em, whatever you need." Another pause, and when she spoke again, her tone had shifted, still tired but firmer. "Okay, I'll try. But if I snap and dump coffee on his head, you're bailing me out." "Deal," I said, grinning to spite myself. Black, no sugar, right on his smug face. She laughed again, and for a moment, the distance didn't feel so vast. But after we hung up, the silence crept back, heavier than before. I paced the room, the floorboards groaning under my steps, and stopped at the window. The city sprawled below, a web of lights and shadows, and I felt that old hunger stir, the one that had pushed me to take over the shop, to dream of something bigger. Only now, it wasn't just about me. It was about her, about us, about carving a place in a world that didn't hand out seats for free. The next morning, I got a text from her. Asterisk meeting with Nathan today. Wish me luck. Asterisk, I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the keys, and typed back. Asterisk, you don't need luck. You got this. Asterisk, but as I hit send, doubt gnawed at me. I pictured her walking into that glass-walled conference room, the one I'd seen from the 7th floor, its blinds slanted like bars. Nathan would be there, leaning back in a leather chair, his smirk a weapon honed to cut. The other suits would watch, silent or complicit, while she stood her ground, or tried to. Hours later, she called again. I was behind the counter, the lunch rush fading, when the phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped into the back, leaning against a stack of coffee bags, and answered. "How'd it go?" I asked, bracing myself. Her breath came quick, unsteady. "Not good." He ambushed me. Brought up every mistake I've made since I started. Stuff I didn't even know was wrong. Said I'm not cutting it, that I'm slowing the team down. In front of everyone, James. The whole department. My chest tightened, rage bubbling up like steam in a clogged machine. "What did you say?" I tried to defend myself. Told him I'd fix those mistakes, that I'm learning. But he just kept going. Said if I can't handle the pressure, I should go back to steaming lattes. She stopped, and I heard her swallow hard. I wanted to walk out. Right then. But I didn't. Good. I said, though it didn't feel good. It felt like she'd been thrown into a ring with no gloves, no rules. You stayed. That's something. Is it? Her voice cracked. I felt so small, like I was back in that coffee shop. But worse, because now I got something to lose. And he knows it. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal of a shelf, searching for words. He's a coward, picking on you because he can, but you're tougher than he thinks. You're still there, still fighting. Barely, she whispered. I don't know how long I can keep this up. He's not just a jerk. He's good at this, at tearing people down. I'm outmatched. No, you're not. I straightened, my voice firm. He's got the upper hand now, but that's temporary. You'll find a way. We'll find a way. She didn't reply right away, and I could almost see her, head tilted, eyes distant, weighing my words against the bruise Nathan had left. I hope you're right, she said finally, because I'm not sure I am. The call ended, and I stood there, the sacks of beans pressing into my back. Their earthy smell grounded me while my mind spun. The shop's noise filtered through the door, cups clinking, voices overlapping. But it felt miles away. Emily was slipping, and I couldn't reach her. Not from here. Not yet. But Nathan's face loomed in my head, his smirk a taunt I couldn't shake, and something hardened inside me. This wasn't just her fight anymore, it was mine too. And I'd be damned if I let him break her without a cost. The air in Horizon Manufacturing's Detroit office felt thicker that morning, charged with something I couldn't name as I drove up from Chicago again. It was a Saturday, the kind of gray, biting day where the wind off Lake Michigan clawed at your skin, but Emily had asked me to come. Her voice on the phone last night had been different, shaky, urgent, like she'd stumbled onto something big and didn't know whether to run toward it or away. I'd barely slept, the hum of the road still buzzing in my bones as I pulled into the parking lot. The squat brick building staring back at me like a fortress hiding secrets. Inside, the seventh floor was quieter than usual, the weekend skeleton crew scattered among cubicles like ghosts. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows on the beige carpet, and the coffee machine, my old ally, sat silent in the corner, cold and useless. Emily was waiting by her desk, her blazer swapped for a sweater, her hair loose and wild like she'd been running her hands through it all night. She didn't smile when she saw me, just nodded toward the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall. The blinds were shut tight, but I could feel the weight of what waited inside. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low, clipped. "Not here." She grabbed a folder off her desk, thick, edges worn, and led me toward the room, her steps quick and deliberate. My stomach twisted, a mix of dread and adrenaline, as I followed her. The office stretched around us, empty chairs and flickering monitors, watching like silent jurors. I'd been here before, seen the power in its sterile corners, but today it felt different. Personal, dangerous, like we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. She shut the door behind us, the click echoing in the small space. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and wax polish, its long oak table scarred from years of deals and disputes. A whiteboard hung on one wall, scribbled with half-erased charts, and the Detroit skyline loomed beyond the window, all sharp edges and muted gray. Emily dropped the folder onto the table, paper spilling out, and turned to me, her eyes blazing with something I hadn't seen since our coffee shop days, fire, raw and unfiltered. "Nathan's gone too far," she said, her words tumbling out fast. "Yesterday, he called me into his office, shut the door, sat there smirking like always. Then he started in, same old crap about my education, how I'm a liability, how I'll never make it here without a degree to prop me up. But this time he didn't stop." I leaned against the table, arms crossed, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "What did he say?" She paced, her sneakers silent on the carpet, hands balling into fists. "He said I'm a fraud, that I tricked my way into this job, that I don't deserve it." Then he pulled out my personnel file, my file James, and started reading it aloud. Every detail. Where I grew up, my parents' jobs, the fact I never finished college. He laughed. Said it's a miracle I can even read the reports I file. My jaw tightened, rage coiling like a spring. I could see him now, Nathan, perched behind his desk, that slick hair gleaming under the lights, his voice dripping with venom. He had no right. There's more. She stopped pacing, her gaze locking onto mine, and I saw fear flicker beneath the anger. He told me I've got 2 weeks to prove I belong here, or he's recommended me for termination. Said he's got the pull to make it happen. Friends upstairs, he called them, and then he slid this across his desk. She flipped open a folder, revealing a single sheet, a memo typed and stamped with Horizon's logo. I scanned it quick. Astor's performance review. Emily Carter. Preliminary assessment. Unsatisfactory. Recommendation. Monitor closely. Astor's Nathan's signature sprawled at the bottom, bold and taunting, like he'd already won. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound sharp in the quiet. This is bullshit. He can't do this. You've been here, what, a month? You're killing yourself to keep up. I know. Her voice cracked, and she pressed her palms against the table, leaning in. But he's not wrong about one thing. I'm drowning, James. I'm good, but I'm not good enough yet. And he knows it. He's betting I'll break. I stared at her, the woman I'd married, the one who'd balanced trays and tamed chaos with glance, and saw something new. Cracks, yes, but also a spark, a defiance that hadn't been there last night. You won't break, I said, stepping closer. You're tougher than he thinks. Than I think sometimes. She laughed, bitter and short. Tough doesn't cut it here. This isn't the coffee shop. It's a machine and I'm a cog that doesn't fit. But then, God, this is a part that's messing with me. Something happened after he left. I frowned, the shift in her tone pulling me up short. What? She straightened, crossing her arms like she was bracing herself. Lucas came by my desk. Lucas Hayes, he's the section chief, Nathan's boss. Older guy, quiet, doesn't say much. I barely talked to him since I started. He just stood there, looking at me, then asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, fine, whatever, but he didn't buy it. He asked about Nathan, point blank. Is he giving you trouble? My pulse quickened. What did you say? I didn't know what to say. I mumbled something about it being fine, just work stuff, but he kept looking at me, like he could see right through it. Then he said, You're doing better than you think, Carter. Keep your head down. Keep pushing. I'll handle Nathan. And he walked off. I let that sink in, the room's silence pressing against my ears. Lucas Hayes, a name I'd heard in passing, a shadow figure in Horizon's hierarchy. If he was stepping in, this wasn't just Emily's fight anymore, it was shifting, tilting into something bigger. You think he's serious? I don't know. She rubbed her face, exhaustion carving lines around her eyes. Maybe he's got pull, real pull, not the fake crap Nathan brags about. I looked him up last night. He's been with Horizon 20 years. Came up from the factory floor. People respect him. If he's watching me, if he's watching Nathan, things could change. Change how? I pressed, my mind racing. You think he'd move Nathan? Maybe. Or promote me out from under him. I don't know. But it's the first time I felt like I might have a shot here, like someone's in my corner. She paused, her voice softening. Except you, obviously. I grinned, but it faded fast. So what's the play? You wait for Lucas to fix it. No. Her answer came sharp, decisive, and she tapped the memo with her finger. I'm not waiting for anyone. Nathan wants me to prove myself? Fine. I'll bury him in work so good he can't touch me. I stayed up all night rewriting that report he shredded. Better, tighter, with numbers he can't argue with. I'm turning it Monday straight to Lucas. I nodded, admiration swelling despite the knot in my gut. That's my girl. Hit him where it hurts. His ego. Yeah. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. But here's the thing, James. I'm scared. Not just of failing, but of what this is doing to me. I'm angry all the time now. I dream about humiliating him, making him pay. That's not who I was. Her words hung there, heavy, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I knew that anger. I'd felt it too, simmering every time she called me bruised by Nathan's barbs. But hearing it from her, seeing it twist a woman I loved, hit different. "You're not him," I said, reaching for her hand. "You're fighting back. There's a difference." "Is there?" She pulled away, her gaze drifting to the window, the city's jagged teeth biting into the sky. "I want to win, James. Not just survive. Win. And I don't care if it's dirty. That memo? I photocopied it. If Nathan pushes harder, I'll take it upstairs myself. Screw the chain of command." I stared at her, the air between us crackling. This was it, the turn, the moment she stopped bending and started breaking things. My chest tightened with pride, fear, something I couldn't name. "You sure about this?" "No," she admitted, her voice raw. "But I'm done playing nice. He wants a fight? He's got one." The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in with the way of her choice. Outside, a siren wailed, faint and distant, while the skyline stood silent, a witness to whatever came next. I wanted to protect her, to storm Nathan's office myself and end this, but I knew I couldn't. This was her battlefield, her war. And as I looked at her, shoulders squared, eyes hard, I realized she wasn't just a woman I'd married anymore. She was something sharper, something forged in this sterile hell. "Monday's going to be big," I said, stepping closer. "You ready?" She exhaled, slow and steady, and nodded. "I have to be." The elevator door slid open with a soft hiss, spilling me out onto the 32nd floor of Horizon Manufacturing's New York headquarters. I stepped into a world that felt like it belonged to someone else. Polished marble floors stretching endlessly beneath recessed lighting, walls of smoked glass reflecting the city's jagged skyline, and a hush so deep it pressed against my ears. My sneakers squeaked faintly, a small rebellion against the sterile perfection, as I clutched the strap of my bag tighter. This was it. My first day as section chief, a title I clawed my way into after a month of Nathan's venom and Lucas's quiet nods. Detroit was behind me now, a gritty memory of beige cubicles and shredded reports. But the promotion didn't feel like victory yet. It felt like a tightrope stretched over a pit I couldn't see. The reception desk loomed ahead, a sleek slab of black granite manned by a woman, in a crisp blazer, who barely glanced up from her screen. "Name?" she asked, her voice flat mechanical. "Emily Carter," I said, and my own name sounded foreign here, too small for the weight of this place. She tapped something into her computer, then slid a temporary ID badge across the counter, without a word. I picked it up, the plastic cool against my fingers, and headed down the hall she pointed to, my pulse ticking faster with every step. The air smelled of leather and ambition, a far cry from the burnt coffee and pastrami of my old life. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined one side, framing Manhattan's chaos. Taxis weaving like yellow threads, skyscrapers stabbing at a sky bruised with clouds. It was power made visible, and I was supposed to belong here now. My office, or what they called an office, was at the end of the corridor, a glass box carved out of the larger floor plan. I pushed the door open, and the space hit me all at once. A desk of dark wood, a chair that looked like it cost more than my rent, a single potted plant in the corner, like a grudging nod to life. The walls were transparent, offering no privacy, just a fishbowl for the suits to gawk at their newest experiment. I dropped my bag on the desk and sank into the chair, the leather creaking under me, and for a second, I let myself breathe. I'd made it, out of Nathan's shadow, out of Detroit's grind, into something bigger. Relief washed over me, cool and fleeting, until the door swung open again. "Carter, right?" The voice was sharp, familiar, and my stomach dropped as I looked up. Nathan stood there, framed in the doorway, his suit impeccable, his smirk a blade honed to cut. He held a manila envelope in one hand, tossing it lightly like it was nothing, but his eyes were locked on me, gleaming with something cruel. "Welcome to the big leagues." I straightened, my hands flattening on the desk, determination hardening inside me like steel cooling after forge. "What are you doing here?" My voice stayed steady, though my heart slammed against my ribs. He was supposed to be in Detroit, demoted or sidelined. Lucas had promised me that much when he greenlit my transfer. "Funny story," he said, stepping inside and letting the door click shut behind him. The sound echoed, a gavel dropping in my mind. Turns out, I've got friends in high places too. Higher than Lucas. Even. So instead of a slap on the wrist, I got a lateral move. New York. Same floor as you, actually. He grinned, teeth flashing, and tossed the envelope onto my desk. It landed with a soft thud, papers shifting inside. Thought I'd deliver your official badge myself. Consider it a housewarming gift. I didn't move, didn't reach for it. Just stare at him as the room seemed to shrink, the glass walls pressing in. You're not my supervisor anymore, I said, low and firm. You don't get to play games with me here. Oh, I'm not playing. He leaned forward, palms on my desk, his cologne sharp and invasive. This isn't Detroit, sweetheart. You're not some scrappy underdog anymore. You're in my world now, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. He straightened, tapped the envelope once with his finger, and walked out, leaving the air charged with his threat. My hand shook as I reached for it, the flap already loose, and slid out the contents. A new ID badge stared back at me. My photo, grainy, unflattering, pulled from some old file beneath the title section chief, Emily Carter. But scrawled across it in red marker, in Nathan's jagged handwriting, were 2 words, Coffee Girl. The letters bled into the plastic, mocking me, stripping away every ounce of ground I gained. I dropped it like it burned, my breath catching as the humiliation hit, sharp, hot, a blade twisting in my gut. He'd done this in Detroit, shredded my work, my confidence. But this was different. This was public, permanent. A brand I'd ever wear around my neck every day in this glass cage. I could already see it. The glances, the whispers, the way the suits down the hall would smirk when they saw it clipped to my blazer. My promotion, my shot at proving myself, reduced to a cheap jab by a man who couldn't stand to lose. The skyline blurred beyond the window as my eyes stung, but I blinked it back, fury rising to smother the shame. He wanted me to break, to run, to prove him right. I'd felt that pressure before, his voice in my ear, his taunts peeling back my skin. But this time, I wasn't alone in a cubicle with no allies. Lucas had seen me, believed in me, and this office, this title, was proof I'd earned something. Nathan could scribble all he wanted. He couldn't erase that. I grabbed the badge, my fingers tightening around it, and stood. The hall outside buzzed faintly. Phones ringing, voices overlapping, as I marched toward the security office I'd passed earlier. The guy behind the counter, a bored 20-something with a buzz cut, barely looked up as I slid the defaced badge across to him. Need a new one, I said, my voice tight but calm. This one's damaged. He glanced at it, eyebrows lifting slightly at the red scrawl, but he didn't ask. Give me 10 minutes, he muttered, turning to his computer. I nodded and stepped back, leaning against the wall, the cold marble grounding me as my mind raced. Nathan wasn't just here to gloat. He was here to fight. A lateral move meant he'd lost some ground, sure, but not enough. He clawed his way to New York, same as me, and that smirk told me he had planned connections, a web I couldn't see yet. I thought of Lucas, his quiet promise to handle Nathan, and wonder how much he knew. Had he underestimated Nathan's reach? Or was this a test? A shove into deeper waters to see if I'd sink? The security guy handed me a fresh badge, clean and unmarked, and I clipped it to my blazer, the weight of it steadying me. Back in my office, I sat again, the envelope still sprawled across my desk like a challenge. I shoved it into a drawer out of sight, but Nathan's presence lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. Determination burned hotter now, edged with something darker. Anger, yes, but also a hunger I hadn't felt before. I wanted to beat him, not just survive him. I wanted him to choke on those words he'd scrawled. My phone buzzed, James's name lighting up the screen. I answered. Sinking back into the chair, the city sprawling beyond the glass like a battlefield I'd just stepped onto. Hey, he said, his voice warm, anchoring. How's the first day? I exhaled, a shaky laugh slipping out. Complicated. Nathan's here. A pause, then a low curse. What? I thought Lucas. So did I. I glanced at the drawer, the envelope's edge peeking out. He's not done with me. Showed up with a badge, wrote Coffee Girl on it. like I'm still some joke to him. Bastard. James's tone hardened, and I could picture him pacing his Chicago apartment, fists clenched. You okay? No. I admitted, the word raw in my throat. But I'm not running. I got a new badge. Start over. He's not winning this. Good. Relief softened his voice, but there was fire in it too. You're tougher than he knows, Em. What's the plan? I stare at the skyline, the towers glinting like knives in the dull light. Find out why he's here, what he's got up his sleeve. He's not just some loudmouth anymore. He's got pull, James. I need to know how much. Smart. Dig deep. Anything I can do? Keep me sane, I said, half smiling despite myself. This place, it's different. Bigger. I feel like I'm drowning already. You're not. You're swimming. Just keep moving. I nodded, though he couldn't see it, and hung up, the silence settling back like a weight. The office stretched around me, all glass and steel, a machine humming with power I didn't fully grasp yet. Nathan was out there, somewhere on this floor, plotting his next move. But so was I, and as the day bled into dusk, the city's lights flickering on like 1,000 eyes, I realized something. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about taking something back. Something he tried to steal in Detroit. Something I hadn't even known I'd lost until now. The glass walls of my office felt like they were closing in. The 32nd floor of Horizon Manufacturing's New York headquarters humming with a tension I could taste, sharp, metallic, like blood on my tongue. The city sprawled beyond the windows, its lights pulsing through the dusk, a million lives indifferent to the war brewing in this sterile box. My new ID badge hung from my blazer, crisp and unmarked, but the ghost of Nathan's red scrawl, asterisk coffee girl asterisk, burned in my mind, a brand I couldn't scrub away. I'd barely sat down after hanging up with James when the phone on my desk buzzed, a harsh, insistent sound that jolted me upright. The display flashed an internal extension I didn't recognize, and my gut twisted as I picked it up. Carter, I said, forcing my voice steady, though my hand gripped the receiver too tight. Emily. Nathan's voice slithered to the line, smooth and venomous, like oil spilling over clean water. Settling in, I see. Desk looks good. View's better than Detroit, huh? I glanced at the glass walls, the hallway beyond alive with shadows of suits moving past, and realized he could see me, probably leaning against some corner office, smirking into his own phone. My skin prickled, the fishbowl feeling sharpening into something claustrophobic. What do you want, Nathan? Straight to business. I like that. He chuckled, low and deliberate. Just thought I'd check in. First days are rough, especially up here. Lots of eyes on you now. Big title, big pressure. Hope you're ready. I am. I snapped, though the words fell hollow. My eyes darted to the drawer where I'd shove his envelope, its edge still taunting me. You're wasting your time. Am I? His tone shifted, edged with something darker. See, I've been thinking. You're a fighter, I'll give you that. Scrappy little thing. Claw your way up from pouring lattes to the shiny new chair. But this isn't Detroit, sweetheart. This is the deep end. And I'm not sure you can swim. I stood, the leather chair creaking behind me, and paced to the window, needing something solid, the cold glass against my palm, to anchor me. Outside, the skyline glittered, towers clawing at the sky, a testament to power I dreamed of touching. Now it felt like a jury staring me down. I don't need your pep talk, I said, my voice low, trembling with fury I couldn't hide. You're not my boss here. You've got no pull over me. Not directly, no. He paused, letting the silence stretch, and I could hear the smirk in it. But I got friends, people who matter, and they're curious about you. Lucas's pet project, the girl with no degree and a chip on her shoulder. They're watching, Emily. One slip and you're done. My breath caught, a sharp stab of doubt cutting through the anger. I pressed my forehead against the glass, the chill seeping into my skin, and pictured him, Nathan, lounging somewhere down the hall, his tailored suit a shield for the venom underneath. He wasn't bluffing. I felt it in my bones. Detroit had been a skirmish, a proving ground. But this was war. Bigger, uglier, with stakes I hadn't fully grasped until now. "You're full of shit," I said, but it sounded weak, a reflex more than a rebuttal. "Am I?" He laughed again, sharp and cutting. "Check your inbox. Welcome gift from me to you." The line went dead, a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. I dropped the receiver, my hand shaking as I sank back into chair and pulled up my email. There it was, sitting at the top like a coiled snake. Subject: orientation packet. Section: Chief Carter. Sender: Nathan Ellis. My cursor hovered over it, dread pooling in my stomach, but I clicked anyway. The attachment opened. A PDF, official-looking, stamped with Horizon's logo. Pages of schedules, org charts, protocols, all standard for a new role. But buried in the middle, a single page stood out. My personnel file, the same one he'd mocked in Detroit, now annotated in red. Beside my education, asterisk incomplete community college asterisk, he'd written asterisk self-taught, self-deluded, asterisk next to my job history, asterisk coffee shop associate, 3 YRS asterisk, a scrawl, asterisk barista chief, cute story, asterisk, and at the bottom, in bold caps, recommended for review, potential liability. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my pulse roared in my ears. This wasn't just memoir, just a prank. It was a calculated strike, a public execution of my credibility, and he'd made sure it'd follow me here. The file wasn't new. I'd seen it before when he'd waved it in my face in Detroit. But this was different. He weaponized it, turned it into a digital blade, and I had no doubt he'd sent it wide, to every suit on this floor, maybe higher. My promotion, my fresh start, was now a punchline, and humiliation hit me like a fist, hot, suffocating, stealing the air from my lungs. I shoved the chair back, the screech of metal on marble jarring in the silence, and stood, my hands curling into fists. The office felt like a cage, the glass walls mocking me with their transparency. No secrets, no defenses, just me on display, bleeding out for anyone to see. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but all I could do was pace, my sneakers thudding against the floor, the sound swallowed by the vastness of this place. The city outside loomed, its indifference a cruel mirror to the power humming through these halls. Power I thought I'd earned, power Nathan was hell-bent on stripping away. My phone buzzed again, James this time, and I answered without thinking, my voice raw. He did it again. "What happened?" His tone sharpened, urgent, and I could picture him sitting up, the Chicago night pressing against his window. He sent my file, my whole damn history, to everyone, annotated it like some sick joke, called me a liability. I choked on the word, the shame boiling into rage. "It's everywhere, James. They're all seeing it right now." "Jesus," he muttered, then louder. "That bastard. He's scared. He's lashing out because you're a threat." "A threat?" I laughed, bitter and jagged. "I'm a joke. Section Chief Coffee Girl. That's what they'll call me now." "No." His voice cut through, firm, grounding. "They'll call you that if you let them. You fight this. You don't fold." "How?" I pressed my hand against the glass again, the cold biting into my palm. "He's got people, James. He's not just some loudmouth. He's connected. I'm out of my depth." "You're not." I heard him shift, the creak of his chair faint over the line. "You've got Lucas. You've got me. And you've got that brain of yours, smarter than he'll ever be. He's loud because he's got nothing else." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of it, the eyes I couldn't see, the whispers I couldn't hear, crushed me. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered, the admission tearing at me. "It's too much." "You can." He didn't hesitate. "You've been through worse. You're not breaking now. What's your next move?" I exhaled, slow and shaky, my mind racing. I need to know who he sent it to. Limit the damage. Then I hit back harder. "Good. That's my girl." Pride edged his voice, but I barely felt it. "I'll call Henry. That contract's still in play. He'll want no Nathan screwing with us." Henry, Horizon VP, the one who'd signed off on James's $634 million deal. A deal he'd canceled when Nathan's games went too far. My breath steadied, a thread of resolve tightening. Yeah, do it. Tell him Nathan's a loose cannon. On it, he said. You hang in there. We're ending this. The call ended, and I stood there, the office's silence deafening, the skyline a cold witness. I wasn't sure if it could end it. Not yet, but the anger was shifting, hardening into something I could use. Nathan thought he'd broken me. He was wrong. I'd bury him, even if it cost me everything. The next morning, the 32nd floor buzzed with tension so thick I could feel it in my teeth. I stepped off the elevator at 8:55, my heels clicking against the marble, an upgrade from sneakers, a deliberate choice to match the stakes. My blazer was pressed, my hair pulled back tight, and the new badge gleamed against my chest like armor. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with glass offices where heads turned subtly as I passed, their glances heavy with curiosity or judgment. I couldn't tell which, and I didn't care. I'd spent the night prepping, rehearsing every word, every angle, until my voice felt like a weapon I could wield. Henry's office was at the end of the corridor, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a king's throne. His assistant waved me in without a word, her eyes flickering with something, sympathy, maybe, or just exhaustion. I pushed the door open, and the room hit me all at once. Dark with paneling, a massive desk piled with folders, and a view that swallowed half of Manhattan. Central Park a green scar, cutting through the gray. Henry stood by the window, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, his navy suit crisp against the morning light. Nathan sat in a leather chair across from the desk, legs crossed, his smirk flickering as I walked in, though it didn't reach his eyes this time. "Carter," Henry said, turning from the window, his voice gravelly, commanding, like he'd spent decades barking orders and expected them followed. "Sit." I took the chair beside Nathan, keeping my spine straight, my hand steady on my lap. The air smelled of coffee and old leather, a faint tang of power that made my pulse kick harder. Nathan shifted beside me, his cologne sharp and intrusive, but I didn't look at him. Not yet. Henry's eyes locked on mine, gray and unreadable, and I felt the weight of scrutiny like a physical thing. "You know why you're here," he said, leaning against the desk, arms crossed. "James pulled a $634 million contract yesterday. Says it's because of you." He nodded at Nathan, his jaw tightening. "And him." Nathan leaned forward, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "Henry, let's not overreact. James is bluffing. He's got no leverage without that deal. And her." He jerked his head toward me, his tone dripping with disdain. "She's an over her head. Always has been. Detroit proved that." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I held it, letting him talk, letting him dig. Henry's gaze shifted to me, expectant, and I took a breath, slow and deliberate, before speaking. "He's wrong," I said, my voice low but firm, cutting through Nathan's echo. "James isn't bluffing. He canceled that contract because Nathan's been targeting me since Detroit, harassing me, undermining me, trying to run me out. Yesterday, he set my personnel file to half this floor, marked up with insults, calling me a liability. That's not overreacting. That's sabotage." Nathan snorted a sharp, dismissive sound. "She's exaggerating. It was a joke, a welcome prank. She's too sensitive for this level. Henry, you see that? A joke." I turned him now, my eyes locking onto his, and let the fury I'd bottled up spill into my voice. "You scrawled coffee girl on my badge. You mocked my education, my work, in front of everyone. You've been gunning for me since day one, and now you're costing Horizon millions because you can't stand losing to someone you think's beneath you." His smirk faltered, just for a second, and I saw the crack. Fear, maybe, or the realization that this wasn't Detroit's sandbox anymore. Henry raised a hand, cutting us off, and the room went still, the silence heavy with authority. "I've seen the file," he said, his tone flat, final. "Got a copy from IT this morning. Not a joke, Nathan. Sloppy, vindictive, and expensive." He straightened, stepping closer, his shadow falling across the desk. "James says you're a loose cannon. I'm starting to agree." Nathan's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the chair arms. "Henry, come on. She's a liability here, No degree, no experience. I was trying to expose that before it bit us. The contract a tantrum, not my fault. Bullshit. I snapped, leaning forward, my pulse roaring. You exposed nothing but your own pettiness. I've been busting my ass, Detroit here every day, while you play games. You want to talk fault? Look at the deal you just torched because you couldn't let it go. Henry's eyes flicked between us, weighing, judging, and I felt the moment stretch, taut, electric, a wire ready to snap. My chest burned with everything I'd held back. The shame of that badge, the rage of his taunts, the fear I'd never climb out from under him. But there was something else now. Pride, sharp and unyielding, in how far I'd come, in the fight James and I had waged together. I wouldn't fold. Not here. Not now. Enough, Henry said, his voice a hammer dropping. He turned to Nathan, his gaze cold. You're done here. Pack your desk. I'll deal with the fallout. Nathan froze, his face paling, the smirk on like it had been slapped off. Henry, you can't. I can, Henry cut in, stepping closer, towering over him. And I am. You've got an hour. The room spun, the air rushing out of me as Nathan stood, slow and stiff, his eyes darting to me. Hate, pure and raw, blazing there. He didn't speak, didn't argue, just walked out, the door clicking shut behind him with finality that echoed in my bones. I sat there, stunned, the weight of it crashing down. Victory, yes, but jagged, costly, a prize I clawed from wreckage. Henry turned to me, his expression softening just a fraction. You're keeping that deal alive, Carter. Talk to James. Get it back on the table. Can you handle that? I nodded, my throat tight, words failing me for once. Yes, I'll make it work. Good. He stepped back to the window, the city sprawling behind him, a kingdom he still ruled. You've got grit. Don't lose it. I stood, legs unsteady, and walked out, the hallway stretching ahead like a gauntlet I'd already run. Nathan's office door was open as I passed, his silhouette hunched over a box, and for a split second I felt it, satisfaction, cold and sweet, curling in my gut. He'd lost. We'd won. But as the elevator doors closed behind me, the high faded, replaced by a hollow ache. This wasn't the end. Just a turn, a new fight waiting beyond the glass. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, sealing off the 32nd floor of Horizon Manufacturing's New York headquarters like a vault closing on a chapter I'd fought tooth and nail to write. My reflection stared back on the mirrored walls, blazer crisp, hair still tight, but my eyes carried the weight of the morning. Henry's gravelly verdict, Nathan's pale shock, the deal dangling by a thread I'd sworn to reweave. The hum of the descent matched the buzz in my chest, a tangle of triumph and exhaustion that left me unsteady on my heels. I'd won, hadn't I? Nathan was gone, his venom drained, but the victory tasted sharp, metallic, like blood bitten back too long. Outside, the midtown air hit me again, colder now as the sun climbed higher, slicing through the canyons of glass and steel. I walked, fast, aimless, past suits barking into phones, past horns blaring the gridlock, the city's pulse a drumbeat under my feet. My phone burned in my pocket, James waiting for the update. But I needed a minute to breathe, to feel the ground beneath me before I handed him the piece of our fight I'd just reclaimed. I stopped at a corner, the wind tugging at my coat, and leaned against a lamppost, the metal frigid against my palm. Central Park sprawled in the distance, a green slash against the gray, and I wondered what Emily Carter, coffee shop Emily, would have thought of this moment. She'd have laughed maybe at the absurdity of it all. Back in my office, the glass walls felt less like a cage now, more like a perch. I sank into the leather chair, the creak of it familiar, and dialed James. The line clicked, his voice bursting through, rough with impatience. Well, what happened? He's out. I said, the words heavy, final. Henry canned him. Nathan's packing his desk as we speak. A low whistle cut through the static, then a laugh, sharp, victorious. Holy hell, Em. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. I corrected, my lips twitching into a half smile. Your contract stunt lit the fuse. Henry didn't like the mess Nathan made. Said it was sloppy expensive. He's giving me the reins to pull the deal back. Damn right he is. Pride thick in his tone, warm and solid, grounding me across the miles. You're a force, you know that? What's the next step? I exhaled slow, my gaze drifting to the skyline, towers glinting like knives in the morning light. I negotiate with Henry, keep the deal alive, but it's contingent on Nathan staying gone. No demotion, no second chances. He's finished here. Good, James said, fierce. Make it ironclad. He doesn't deserve an inch. He won't get one. My voice hardened, resolve settling into my bones. I'll call Henry now. Get it locked down. Do it, he said. And Em, I'm proud of you. So damn proud. The call ended, and I sat there, the silence wrapping around me like a cloak. The office stretched out, all sleek lines and cold glass, a battlefield turned trophy room. At least for today. I dialed Henry's extension, my fingers steady now, and when his assistant patched me through, his gravelly Carter rumbled over the line. I've got James on board, I said, skipping preamble. The deal's back, $634 million. Same terms, but only if Nathan's out for good. No loopholes. Henry grunted, a sound that could have been approval or annoyance. I couldn't tell. He's gone. Papers are signed. You've got your deal. Don't screw it up. I won't, I said, and meant it. The line went dead, and I leaned back, the tension bleeding out of me, replaced by a quiet, fragile satisfaction. It wasn't clean, wasn't pretty, but it was ours, mine and James's, carved from the wreckage Nathan had left. 10 years later, the Chicago wind still howled the way it did back then, rattling the windows of my cafe as I wiped down the counter. The place smelled of espresso and cinnamon, a warm hum of life that clung to the air, so different from the sterile Biter Horizon's offices. The walls were wood now, not beige or glass, rough-hewn planks lined with black and white photos of the city, the loop's towers softened by time and distance. A chalkboard hung behind me, scrawled with today's specials in my looping hand, and the tables, scarred, sturdy oak, were scattered with regulars nursing mugs, their chatter a low, steady buzz. This was my kingdom, built from scratch after I walked away from New York, from Horizon, from a machine that had nearly ground me down. I'd quit 6 months after Nathan's fall. The deal secured, my name cleared, but the taste of it had soured. The glass walls, the power plays, the constant edge of proving myself. It wasn't what I'd wanted, not really. James had understood, even pushed me to do it, to take the money we'd saved and build something real, something ours. So here I was, 42 now, hair streaked with gray I didn't bother hiding, hands rough from years of grinding beans and balancing trays. The cafe wasn't Horizon scale, no millions, no skyscrapers, but it was mine, every inch, and that was enough. The bell above the door jingled, sharp in the afternoon lull, and I looked up, my rag pausing mid-swipe. A man stepped in hesitant, his silhouette framed against the gray sky outside. He was thinner than I remembered, his suit swapped for a worn jacket, hair receding at the temples. Nathan, my stomach tightened, a reflex from a decade ago, but I didn't flinch, just watched as he crossed the room, his step slow, deliberate, like he was testing the ground. "Emily," he said, stopping a few feet from the counter, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it, stripped of its old venom. "You look good." I set the rag down, crossing my arms, the counter a solid barrier between us. "What are you doing here, Nathan?" He shifted, hands in his pockets, eyes darting to floor before meeting mine again. "I've been meaning to come by. Heard about this place. Heard it's yours. Figure it was time." "Time for what?" My tone stayed even, but there was an edge to it. I echoed the woman who'd face him down in Henry's office. He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing, and for the first time, I saw something in him. Vulnerability, maybe, or regret. To say I'm sorry. For everything. Detroit, New York, the badge, all of it. I was an asshole. Worse than that. You didn't deserve it. I stared at him, the words hanging there, heavy and unexpected. The cafe's warmth pressed against me. The hiss of the espresso machine, a faint heartbeat in the silence. I'd imagined this once. him groveling, me gloating. But now that it was real, it didn't feel like I'd thought. The anger was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs. But it wasn't sharp anymore, wasn't the fire that fueled me through Horizon's wars. Why now? I asked, leaning forward, my elbows on the counter. 10 years, Nathan. What changed? He exhaled a shaky sound and rubbed the back of his neck. Lost a lot after Horizon. Job, wife, most of my so-called friends. Took a while to figure out why. I was climbing over people, you included, because I thought that's how it worked. Winning meant someone else had to lose. He paused, eyes flickering to the photos on the wall. Then back to me. You proved me wrong. You didn't just survive. You built this. I didn't see it then, but I do now. I didn't reply right away. Just studied him. The lines etched into his face. The slump in his shoulders. He wasn't the shark I'd known. Not anymore. The cafe hummed around us. A couple laughing softly at a corner table. The clink of a spoon against porcelain. Outside, the wind rattled the glass. But in here, it was steady, warm mine. Thanks. I said finally, the word simple, deliberate. For saying it. Doesn't erase anything, but it's something. He nodded, lips twitching into a faint, awkward smile. Yeah, it's something. He hesitated, then stepped back. I'll let you get back to it. Place looks good, Emily. Really good. The bell jingled again as he left, the door swinging shut behind him, and I stood there, the rag limp in my hand. I didn't feel triumph, not like I'd expected. Just a quiet release, a knot loosening I hadn't known was still tied. The counter gleamed under the soft light, the wood worn smooth by years of my touch, and I traced its grain with my fingers, grounding myself in this life I'd made. James came in an hour later, his coat dusted with snow flurries, his grin wide as he shook off the cold. Smells like home, he said, leaning across the counter to kiss me, his lips warm against mine. Always does, I replied, smiling back, and handed him a mug, black, no nonsense, the way he liked it. He settled at a table near the window, watching me as I moved through the evening rush, and I caught his eye now and then, pride glinting there, steady and unshaken. Later, after the last customer left and the lights dimmed, we sat together, the cafe silent save for the wind outside. I told him about Nathan, the apology, the strange weight of it, and he listened, his hand over mine, thumb brushing my knuckles. You okay with it? He asked, voice low, searching. Yeah, I said, leaning back, the chair creaking beneath me. I think I am. It's done, you know? All of it. Horizon, him, that fight. We're here now. He nodded, squeezing my hand. We're here, and it's better. I looked around the warm wood, the photos, the chalkboard smudge of my handwriting, and felt it settle deep and sure. Satisfaction, yes, but more than that. A life carved out, not borrowed or begged for, but earned. The city growled beyond the windows, its towers still clawing at the sky. But in here, it was just us, James, me, and the cafe that held our story. I didn't need more than that. Not anymore.